Hi there, I'm Brian, one of the librarians from the Lincolnwood Library, and today I'm joined by Kevin in the second entry in our series, Technology for Child Caregivers. And today we are focusing on selecting media. So I'll focus kind of on the technology side, and Kevin is one of our youth librarians, so he is going to supply that side of the presentation today. So the Lincolnwood librarians are excited to help all the residents of Lincolnwood, including families and kids and caregivers, with media, information, and technology. And today we are focusing on technology for helping you to select media. So each episode in this series kind of focuses on a specific topic. This is our second episode. So today we're finishing up the intro. We'll talk about us just so you know who we are. Then we're going to dive into our topic today, which is selecting media. We'll talk about the appropriateness of content, its quality, early literacy. We'll do some demos of specific resources, and hopefully that will help you out today. So again, I'm Brian, and today we are joined by Kevin. And in our previous episode, Anne joined us to talk about setting expectations for kids and technology.
I will take a minute just to introduce myself. My name is Kevin, and I am a youth and teen services librarian, which is a position that I've held full-time since late 2018. And previously, I have a lot of experience working as a librarian in teen services, in youth services, community outreach, and adult reference, and pretty much every job that I've had in a library. And even before working in a library, I've provided a lot of book recommendations and selected materials for all different types of people, including early literacy all the way through adult. And one of the greatest questions and greatest things that I can help with is just kind of that vague question of what should I select for either myself or for my child or the person that I'm with. What are kind of the things that I'm looking for? So I'm happy to talk a little bit about kind of the processes behind that. And just kind of personally, I'm also married to a high school English teacher. So we always talk about selecting media kind of all the time. It's always something present in our house. And I also have a 2-year-old daughter. So early literacy is kind of at the forefront in my personal life right now.
And I have a younger daughter than Kevin. My daughter is about a year old as of the publication of this video. I have been a full-time librarian here at Lincolnwood Library since 2017. I work in adult services, and I do a lot of the technology events and help select some of the media for our collection. Kind of my mission in life is to help people with information and technology and kind of fix things that should already work. I try to find things that work for you. That is who we are.
Just jumping right into it, we will first kind of talk about just the appropriateness of content. So just very big picture, what that means is just kind of finding the right resources for age groups, especially with kids and kind of people under the age of 18. It's kind of one of the hardest things to look at. And honestly, if you can kind of narrow it down in that way, everything becomes a lot easier. And I think it probably makes sense to just talk about this or make this point at the beginning, is that these are kind of all very general rules. Obviously, adults can read teen books, and there are advanced readers and people that struggle with different types of reading and different types of content. So obviously, these are kind of the general guidelines that you want to keep in mind, but what works for you is obviously going to be specific. And so kind of all of the things that go into what makes content appropriate, there's a lot of different factors. And a lot of those factors are kind of already weeded into where we put a book, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. as to kind of what a librarian considers when they're purchasing a book, since we do have to go through and actually purchase all of the books in our collection and kind of where to put things. And there are a lot of factors that go into it, from kind of the Lexile level or the word choice to the content and the themes that go into every single book, and also just kind of the interest level. So there are books that, might be labeled for tween or teen that are actually, as far as word choice, not really any different than something that would be appropriate for a second or third grader, but just the themes and the content are going to be skewed towards someone that's a little bit older, just as far as interest level. So the first thing to consider is the Lexile level. I know a lot of school districts talk about Lexile level and have assignments that a book needs to be in a certain Lexile level. With everything, Lexile levels have their positives and they certainly have their negatives. They can't take everything into account, but it does kind of measure just the overall word choice and how difficult is it to read, and kind of puts it in a category from there. So is it kind of not so much biased, but is it flawed? Sure, but is it a very general way to kind of get a gauge at how hard the book is going to be to read, especially if you struggle with reading or are looking for something a little bit harder? Yeah, it's definitely an option that you can use. And so finding appropriate content, there are kind of a lot of different ways that you can do this, and we're going to talk about all of those coming up, such as common sense media, using professional book reviews, kind of just browsing the library sections, and we'll talk about using all of the resources that the library has and kind of go from there, and then talk about Goodreads and NoveList, which are some other kind of great ways to kind of filter your searches and crowdsource some material on whether a book is appropriate or not. So yeah, I guess just in this slide, again, this is going to be really helpful for not only yourself and for younger readers, and especially as we talk about age groups, I find that these questions really come up when someone is right in between. So let's say someone is just kind of entering out of the board books and into more picture books, or first kind of entering that early reader stage, and so on and so forth. One of the biggest questions is, okay, I'm kind of in between these two sections. How can we kind of filter out certain content that I don't want to read and find something that's going to match my reading level or my child's reading level? And then again, to kind of hit this point again, it's really important, and something that we do as librarians, whether it's in the adult section or the youth section, is to consider the whole person. And that can be really hard to do, especially if you're only, searching a site or just kind of browsing or don't really know where to start. But to consider the person's likes and their dislikes, reading ability, their reading history. So what have they kind of already read? What are they kind of used to? Or is this something that's brand new? So for example, if you've never read manga before, it's a different genre. It takes a little bit of getting used to kind of understand how to read that genre. So you might want to start with something a little bit more on the entry level. And then even things like attention span and energy level. How do you like to learn? Maybe you love kind of visual learning and, are going to really favor graphic novels. And then things that might trigger you as far as themes or content and things like that. And so going back to something like Lexiles, Lexile levels can set really broad boundaries. And again, kind of going back to that, considering the whole person, it doesn't always kind of encompass the necessary elements for you to define appropriate content for your family. There have been changes to Lexiles, but for example, Lexile levels don't always measure, your reading history, or they don't always appropriately measure how images can impact how valuable a book is or how challenging a book is with graphic novels. So there are definitely things to consider with Lexiles and to kind of take them as a grain of salt. But they are there. It is something, especially to like narrow your search down. If you have 1,000 different options, you can kind of say, okay, this is kind of a first step into narrowing down what I'm interested in. And so again, this is kind of something similar. There's guided reading levels, and you can kind of see that these organizations have kind of used Common Core recommendations, and they can also be used in your life outside of school to use as an example for picking out books or picking out content. Okay, so we can kind of see the different grade levels here. And I think especially with Lexile levels, you're probably mostly going to see them in kind of a school-related setting. So they're really going to be used mainly to kind of figure out school projects. That's where I think those are going to be the most helpful in determining what a good book is or what a good piece of content to use is. It really doesn't encompass all of the kind of likes and dislikes. So especially for like free reading, or when you get a little bit older and want to explore certain themes, the Lexile levels are going to be a little bit less useful. And you can kind of see it's a pretty standard kind of progressive chart that they use all the way through that kind of tween age group. Okay, so we will move on. And again, we find a lot of times people might have kind of special situations where they want something really specific that's maybe in their family. Maybe they're, really triggered or really anxious to read something that has violence in it, which is understandable. Or there might be kind of religious considerations when you're picking content. And those are obviously going to take a really high priority, and something that we'll talk about with some of these other resources that can kind of better factor those things in. So obviously, especially when you're talking to a librarian or using these resources, you are kind of the ultimate decider. And it's really a good thing to know because, the better or the more comfortable you are with reading it and the more excited you are to read something, the better you're going to engage with it, the more you're going to learn from it, and just the more your child is going to develop from it. So everyone in our staff here at Lincolnwood really promotes the idea of kind of you being the final person to decide things. We can make great recommendations for you, but that doesn't really mean that you have to take them or take any of our recommendations. We're all very comfortable with you saying, no, that's really not interesting to me. I would rather read this. And that is totally fine. And it's going to be better for you if you find out what you actually want to read. So one of the main kind of websites that people use is Common Sense Media. And just kind of a big picture overview of what that is just kind of a general review site. So it's a pretty straightforward review of the book, and it kind of breaks down the different content that is in the book or the movie or the TV show. It does more than just books, which is one of the good things about it, is it pretty much covers anything in pop culture. And then it kind of rates them at how intense they are and assigns kind of a single rating and a kind of single age rating for that piece of content. And I'll talk about some of the positives, just big picture really quick, is that it's pretty focused and it kind of gets right to the point. So if you see a book and it says this is going to be a book that is aged 6+, and here are the reasons why, and here are the major themes, and then here are the kind of things that you're going to want to look out for. And then it goes really into kind of the major questions that the book or the movie ask. And so here you can kind of see an example of what something like a review on Common Sense Media would talk about. So it would talk about language that's used, violence that's used, how scary is it, And then based on these things, it's going to assign a rating. And so it's really valuable for parents and educators just to get a sense of what's coming. So again, it's not going to touch on every single aspect of the book. It's not going to give a super detailed review of the book. But if you're looking at, okay, this is the book that I'm thinking of reading, or I'd like to find something that's not so violent, or I'm looking at something a little bit darker, or okay with this amount of language, whatever it is, this is going to just kind of cut through all of that and provide a really nice overview of what you're going to expect from a book. And especially either as an educator or a parent, you're going to be able to anticipate some of those more difficult conversations with a child, which is obviously really important. And it's always helpful to know what you're getting into before you actually start reading or viewing the content. And so here's kind of a bigger picture idea of what the site is going to look like. Again, one thing about this site is you're probably, if you have no idea what you're reading, this site is not going to be super helpful. So you kind of have to know what books you're looking for to use this site. But once you have kind of an idea, maybe something like, oh, you've heard of this book called The Hunger Games. You also know that there's definitely some violence in that, just based on the very big overview of the book. You know that it's going to have a little bit of violence involved, but you also know that it's kind of a tween teen book. This would be a great site to go to and say, okay, here's what I can expect when I'm going to read The Hunger Games.
And we are going to use Kevin's example of The Hunger Games. Although you see on this homepage, they also have Bill Martin Jr. and Eric Carle's Brown Bear, What Do You See? So it's really a very wide variety. So they have the search bar here, and I'll just type in Hunger Games. And you see it is giving me, suggestions. I can also just ignore the suggestions and see all results, or press the magnifying glass button. But if the search results are correct, you can click one of them. So maybe, though, I'm going to just press search because I want to find the book. So you see they're saying the movies are 13 plus, 13 plus, 14 plus for Catching Fire, 14 plus for the original. The newest spin-off, 13 plus. And here, way down the list, is the actual Hunger Games Book 1. They are rating it 12 plus. So you get the cover, you see the author, ratings, kind of the formal Common Sense Media recommendation, age 12 plus, and then this book icon. And I can click on either the cover or the title to go to the actual item. Another important point is on the specific pages for specific items, they break it down based on what parents say, parents being a general term, for them for caregiver, and kids, of course, as the people reading. So you see there's not too big of a difference here, and you see what they are basing that on. So 13 plus or 11 plus. You can see what they kind of are ranking on, what things are highly present, and then what parents need to know. So you can see kind of different triggers. Again, just like Kevin said, it really gets down to kind of the specifics. It's not a huge review, but it's really a review in terms of things that people are really interested in knowing for kind of selecting media. You can also see specific user reviews, but you may want to take those with a grain of salt. And you can filter those between the catch-all category parents and kids. If you have an account, you can put your own rating. And then they have even more. You can also see points to talk to your kids about. Like Kevin said, good resources are going to help you to anticipate conversations that you may need to have with the people that you are helping to read or experience other media. And you can see just some structured information about the book. They've got topics, and you can click through to see more. And you see when it's published, the publisher recommended age, how long it is, and where it is available.
Especially when a child is kind of in that transitional phase and maybe reading this as something that's going to be a little bit more violent or a little bit more adult, the more the parents can kind of anticipate those conversations, like Brian and I both said, and the more they can kind of be ready to have quality conversations about that content, the better the child is going to make that transition into more difficult books and just books with harder themes, especially getting into that kind of tween teen section, which I am the selector for at Lincolnwood Public Library. So I definitely get that question a lot, and it's something that I consider when I'm purchasing a book is the kind of appropriateness of the content. And one thing that I always come back to is the more a parent can engage with their kid or more that a caregiver can engage with a child about those difficult themes, the better the child is going to be able to process them appropriately and understand them in a kind of deeper way.
So we focused on a book here, but we'll just quickly go through all the other sections. They have a section for movies and TV where they review this type of content, and they have filters where you could go by specific ages and genres. We talked about books already. They do apps and games as well. There are tons of apps, but they do have some lists and reviews. A specific parents need to know section. They've got guides to things like Minecraft and Fortnite and YouTube. You may also need to select content that kids are experiencing in those areas as well. Roblox, Zoom. They have a Latino section as well, which is great for inclusivity, and more.
Okay, so the next kind of big category to talk about when finding something appropriate and just kind of understanding the content of a book would just be kind of standard, more traditional book reviews. And something that I use and all of the librarians use are kind of these professional and formal book reviews that are going to list the intended ages of readers, but they also have a simple paragraph length book summary and reviews that highlight the major themes. And these are kind of more in-depth and are going to talk about appropriateness and themes, but also get a little bit more specific than something in Common Sense Media. They're going to talk about the characterization. They're going to talk about kind of how in-depth the themes go and how well the author utilizes those themes, in addition to kind of the overall content that's being discussed. So to kind of give an example, you can see this example of Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas, who is a really popular teen author who wrote The Hate You Give. This is her most recent book. And so it kind of, something like Kirkus and really all of these professional review sites are going to have that kind of one sentence, one phrase that sums up the review, almost like a professional movie critic would give for a movie poster. And even by just reading that, you can pretty much figure out if a professional is going to recommend it or not, or whether it's going to be a quote unquote high quality book that's being reviewed favorably by kind of professionals at the top of their field who are paid to understand these themes. And you can kind of see it's a little bit more detailed summary of what the book actually is. And this summary is kind of interspersed with a very brief overall analysis of what the book is actually about. And so again, I'm using Hunger Games as an example of something that's really kind of big in pop culture. So something like Concrete Rose is going to be a little bit more analytical. It's definitely revered pretty highly in the library community. Hunger Games is definitely kind of a big blockbuster book, and these professional reviews are going to understand that and review them appropriately, and also kind of talk about how this book should be viewed by the readers and librarians and all of that. So I don't think I need to go into too much detail, but basically these kind of professional reviews are going to be a really quality source of what professionals think of the book. And that's going to be really helpful versus just going on a place like Amazon or just kind of a general crowdsourced website. Is you're going to get kind of a more trustworthy source on what the book's about and how it achieves its goals, the kind of themes that it uses, et cetera, et cetera. So that's definitely a resource if you find yourself really wondering about content and wondering about books. I would definitely recommend kind of just starting to get into the habit of reading more professional reviews. You're going to come away with a better understanding of the book and how it's going to be received before you actually start to read it. And same thing with any kind of content. Because we're talking about ages and sections of the library, I think it makes sense to just kind of quickly go through all of the different options that the library has to offer at Lincolnwood and just kind of briefly go over these. Again, can be kind of challenging if you're in that in-between age, and there's definitely some overlap here, but this is just a good guideline to go off of. So now we'll talk a little bit about our library's resources. Even if you don't use our particular library, a lot of these kind of apply to wherever you're going to be browsing in any kind of library. So the Lincolnwood Library is split up by general ages. And when browsing, a great question to ask if you've never been to the library or are really just kind of browsing for the first time is to find the right section for your kids and kind of knowing when to move to a different section, especially if you're in those in-between ages. It can be kind of confusing. The library does a good job of kind of guiding you through that process without even asking for help. But of course, the librarians are always there to kind of help you navigate that process and just kind of show you where to look and help you make your own decision. So here are kind of some examples of how the library kind of helps guide you through that process. So, for example, within the juvenile fiction, we have stickers on the spine of the book that say tween. So if you are just getting into the juvenile fiction and you see a bunch of books that say tween on them, then you're probably going to want to avoid those. They're probably meant for a little bit higher age group, just based on word choice and content and all the things we kind of mentioned before. And if you were someone, let's say, that's just getting into the juvenile fiction section, maybe you're in first or second grade, just kind of exploring that option. A great place to start would be to look for the books that have a sticker that says chapter books. That basically just means that they're going to be more on the early reader side. You can see in the example here, A Bear Called Paddington. So you know that that's kind of a book more for younger kids, and that would be a great place just to start and kind of begin browsing. We also have kind of some genre labels just to kind of understand these are more fantasy books. We also have mystery books. And you can see in this example here, this is going to be important, especially if you're looking at an author like Avi, who writes a lot of different books, is really prolific. He is going to write a book that's labeled in the chapter books, and then he's also going to write some books that are meant for tweens. So if you're just looking at the author, this is going to help kind of whittle that down to a better understanding of what you're looking for. And then we try to do the same thing in our nonfiction section. We recently just added a lot more shelving, and one of the things that we did was actually separate all of the early reader nonfiction out and put it on its own shelf, which is actually super helpful because we got a lot of questions asking for nonfiction books for children under the age of 5 or 6. And previously you had to kind of sift through the entire J nonfiction. Now there's kind of their own section. So all of these things can kind of help you just kind of get that browsing journey started and just kind of narrow your options down so that you're not looking at hundreds and thousands of books. You're really just kind of focusing it on what you know is going to be in your area and of interest. And here you can kind of see specifically what we were just talking about. And if you have any questions, obviously talking to a librarian is going to help clarify that even more. But especially if you just want to spend a little bit of time just sifting through a bunch of books and just kind of taking it all in, these are going to be great guidelines. So we have our board book section, which are going to be those really tough physical books that are meant for exploration, really meant for the beginning of literacy in general. Those are going to be from birth to age 4. And same thing with picture books, although picture books, you can definitely get picture books with a lot more words and a lot more story development and a lot more complicated imagery. And those can be all the way up to like age 6 or so, really until that kind of grade school age. And then from there, we have kind of our I Can Read, also known as early readers or just very beginning chapter books. And those are going to be kind of the first books that you're going to want to look at when your child is starting to read. And we kind of break those down into 3 different levels of difficulty. And we have those labeled in the library from kind of just sight words that the child can look at and begin to read, all the way through like really beginning chapter books where there is a full kind of storyline and different chapters talking about different things. And then kind of our bigger sections, we have J fiction or juvenile fiction. That's going to start in kind of the early grade school age, so right around 7, 8, and then go all the way through kind of tween age groups, so right around 12. And those are going to be mostly chapter books. And then we obviously have a separate section for graphic novels. That's going to be really the same age group that you're talking about. And then the tween section, which is located within J fiction, is going to be 12 to 14. So you're going to kind of get right on the border of kind of a full teen book versus a J fiction. A lot of that honestly has more to do with content than it does word choice. It can really be the same word choice and difficulty of reading as a teen book, but it's probably not going to have some of the more, I don't want to say controversial, but more challenging content in it. And then actual teen section is going to be really kind of 13 all the way up through high school. So through that kind of 18, 19 years old. And that's going to have more challenging content and then more difficult word choice and structures. And then our nonfiction section is really going to be all ages. Same with adult fiction and nonfiction. That's going to have a pretty wide age range. And then, like I said, we actually just moved our early readers. So we actually do have nonfiction that's meant for kind of that birth to age 5 or 6.
Our media collections are also organized in part by age. We have youth DVDs and Blu-rays, along with just general DVDs. And our video game collections also have organization by age as well. So you can browse for younger kids or more of a general audience for video games as well.
And then especially when you're using the library services, it can be really helpful and really overwhelming when you're first searching and you get a bunch of responses to kind of learn how to filter your search. And this is a great offering that I would definitely recommend anyone become familiar with, because it can really, first of all, it can save you a lot of time if you know what you want, but it can also help with some really basic filters that can make a big difference. And it can help you find the right section. If you're looking for something like nonfiction crafting books, you can say, okay, these are all going to be kind of in this one single section is really where I'm going to spend most of my time. And also when you're using something like Hoopla or Kanopy, you may not get really specific results, but they can definitely be helpful, and filtering those searches is going to be something that's really beneficial for you. So we can go through some examples here. So you can see on this picture here, this screenshot of a general search. I believe the original search was just Batman, which is definitely a common question of, hey, I'm interested in superhero books, or I'm interested in Batman. Well, you can kind of run into an issue, which is there's content that is based around Batman from ages 2 all the way through really kind of adults only. And so it's really helpful to learn how to filter those searches so that you know what we have available and you know what's out there. So you can see on the left-hand side the different formats. So you know that with superhero searches, there's going to be a lot of DVDs, a lot of books, and a lot of graphic novels, a lot of different formats. So just that alone is going to be really helpful. And then going through the age groups, that's going to be even more specific, so that if you're looking for something in our early reader section, you're not going to have to filter through all of the most recent Batman movies, which are really made for teens and adults. And then Lexile levels, you can see that we have Lexile books for Batman all the way from the very beginning to something that's really advanced. And then again, going through formats like fiction, nonfiction, if you're looking for behind the scenes on creating comics or creating Batman movies, that can be a really easy filter and just a great way to explore different options. Maybe you're just looking at superhero books, and then these kind of filters can make you think, oh, they might have nonfiction items that I never even considered. Let me just take a look at that. And it doesn't really take a whole lot of time because you can filter through those searches so easily. And then another option to do it is to kind of click on those advanced search options when you're going through the browser and searching for something in our library catalog. That's also going to help you kind of narrow down what we have available for you today, or what we might have in our consortium that we might be able to request for you and have sent over and put on hold for you. So if you're looking for something superhero related, you can say, I'm looking for a DVD and I'm looking for something today. So I'd like to limit the search to what does Lincolnwood Public Library have? And you can do that pretty easily. And that can also help with some confusion. You might say, oh, it looks like this is available, and then you find out it's at a different library. And then again, going through those age ranges can be super helpful as well.
All right, so we'll do a demo of the catalog, and I am on the library homepage. At the top, we have a link to the catalog, which opens it up for us. And you see some things we've highlighted, but you'll probably want to do a search. So I'll take that example Kevin mentioned, Batman, very general search. There are search suggestions that you can use. but I'll just press the magnifying glass here. And you see 115 items at Lincolnwood. We actually sometimes may need to make a broader search. So right now, limit by is Lincolnwood. We share libraries with a group of about 30 libraries in kind of the northwest suburbs. Lincolnwood is the most kind of southeast most of that group. So I can go to all libraries and search. And now you see 2,000 results. So now we are doing a bigger search. So again, you can filter by format, and there are some kind of selected formats that the system thinks we're interested in. We can press more by a lot of these filters, and we see that there are a ton. So I can find all sorts of different formats to filter by. I can do audience as well. So maybe I'm looking for juvenile. So I press that check mark and it updates the search results. So now I'm down to 624. And when you look at the filters after this, the plus indicates that it would add more search results. I could also do within this by Lexile, and these are getting very narrow, only down to 20 or 30 in some case. And you can do even more if it's fiction or nonfiction, and characters and subjects. There are even more filters. A lot of times, some of these filters are not expanded, so you can expand them and take a look by author or series, when things were published, if you're not looking for the newest stuff, but something from last year. I narrowed down that, eliminated about 30 more results from this search. And this was a search of all the libraries in our group, so we could narrow down to just Lincolnwood. And we can see what is available. There's also a really helpful filter for what is available now. You're looking for something and you've narrowed down like this, but you also want to make sure that you'll be able to get it easily. So you can use the available now filter to make sure that everything is going to be that it is available. However many copies we have, at least one is ready to go. And you could call us up or come in person, give us an author or a call number, and we'll be happy to reserve something for you if you have your Lincolnwood Library card. Now there is also advanced search. You can go to more search options and see the advanced search that Kevin mentioned. You can see all the years, more material types, languages, audience, and which library it is at as well. You would select options here and then set search options to apply that and do an advanced search. Or if you change your mind, you can hit close or BX to get out. And it just reloaded. When you have selected something, the kind of specific information for one title has more information that you can see about it. So you can click more info for a page specifically about that item. And sometimes you may see a longer summary. You can click through to other related subjects to browse. You can see more information about the call number, suggestions for read-alikes, and more information. You can always get back by hitting return to list. So that is the catalog. There are a lot of filters on the left side that you can use to narrow down your searches for your families.
All right. So then we also have a lot of different options for online resources. And specifically, we're going to talk about Hoopla as well as Kanopy. And those can also be kind of overwhelming because you're really looking at kind of a different catalog altogether and looking at a different interface. So it can kind of be overwhelming, especially for parents who have never used it before or children who have never used it before. You can kind of not really know where to start. So especially for when thinking about kids, it's really helpful. And I always kind of recommend and point out that Hoopla and Kanopy both have kind of kids editions, and that is going to make things a whole lot easier. And again, there's going to be those similar advanced search options. And yeah, kind of the same thing that we talked about with our catalog. It's just going to help narrow things down and just help make things less overwhelming, which is really the goal when you're browsing. You want as many titles that appear in front of you to be something of interest, so that you're not just overwhelmed or having to dismiss large portions of what you're searching for. So both Hoopla and Kanopy have kids options. You can kind of see right in that top right-hand corner, it kind of lets you know that you're browsing in the kids version. And especially with Hoopla, you're automatically going to be curated a lot of content that's specifically for kids, not just in audiobooks or ebooks, but also movies and music and things like that. And you can also see kind of on the right-hand side, just below that magnifying glass, that you're going to have the same kind of advanced search options as you would in our library catalog. Okay, so I am going to just do a quick demo of Hoopla and talk about kind of the kids mode. And what's nice about Hoopla specifically is that it's really easy to kind of know whether or not you're in the kind of kids mode or kids setting. Just in this top right-hand corner, you can see kids is turned on. And if I just click on it, really anywhere on that icon, it can just go ahead and turn it off. And then if I hit it again, it will turn it right back on. So it is super easy to kind of toggle back and forth between that, which is especially helpful if you are using kind of your account and you're an adult and then you want to look for something for a child. That can be something that you can go back and forth without too much trouble. And then again, you can kind of go through from there. It's pretty similar to what we just discussed. They go through the different genres of ebooks and popular audiobooks. They have information kind of about your account and how much you can download. And then because you are dealing with a bunch of different formats, you can go through those here, as well as some other advanced search options. The series one is very helpful if you kind of know that you're interested in a series but don't have a specific title. You can just look in that series to find out what's next. And then obviously publisher and ISBN numbers are going to be a little bit more specific. And then there's kind of similar browse options for, let's go with movies here. And you can use that to kind of just do a general browsing search. And again, on the left-hand side, just like with the library catalog, there's ways to kind of filter things even further. So you can do it by user rating, format, release date, and date added, as well as language options.
Okay, so we can also demo Kanopy. So I have logged into my account, and in, again, kind of the upper right, just like Kevin showed with Hoopla, Kanopy has their version of the indicator of if you are browsing for kids content or not, and they just kind of do it the opposite way. So in the general section, they say you can go to Kanopy Kids. So that means I'm not in Kids right now, and if I click it, we'll see just visually the content looks quite a bit different, but from there we can do a search or browse by different facets here, and we can exit Kanopy Kids. So I can take a look at something that I am interested in. You can click to see more information, and Hoopla works a very similar way. I can see running time and more information, what it's about. I can click through on different subjects. Now I can browse, maybe say I'm interested, like in this video, for animals. The browse is customized for the current audience, the Kanopy Kids section. So I can see all sorts of different content. And when I do a search, eventually I get these same kind of facets on the left side where I can see different subjects and all sorts of different information that I can search by. So I can go back at any time by pressing this Kanopy Kids logo. And it takes me back, and I am ready again to search or to select something to watch. Now, unlike Hoopla, Kanopy is only TV shows and movies. So you don't have to worry about format here. It's only TV and movies, but you see that they do have quite a bit of content. So you'll still want to filter it using the browse tools by getting into Kanopy Kids itself and using the search.
All right. And then we also have some more specific things that can help you. And some of these are actually kind of the best ways to get at what you are looking at as far as understanding the whole person and finding something that's specific to you. The first one is book bundles. So this is kind of we've had kind of variations on this over the years, but this is basically a really simple Google form that you can fill out and just basically letting the librarians know that you want a personalized selection of usually between 5 to 10 items based on what you're interested in reading or watching or the kind of content that you're interested in. And it's basically a really brief questionnaire based on what kind of genres you want and what's something that you do like in the past, what's something that you definitely don't want, because that's equally as important oftentimes, and then what you're kind of looking for. And these are a really great way to ask us for help, even if the library is closed. And one specific great thing about book bundles is that it gives the librarians a little bit of time to kind of think things over, usually even more time than if you were to ask us a reference question. Usually you're going to get something immediately, but if you give us a book bundle request, we usually think about it throughout the day and then have downtime or whenever we're available to kind of carefully curate something versus kind of recommending something on the spot. Both are great options, but this is something that if you want something a little bit more specific or want a bunch of different options based on something new, this is a really good thing to utilize.
So speaking of that, you can, of course, ask us questions, or in librarian speak, we call that reference interviewing. We have kind of a process when people come to the library to help you out. We listen and try to answer questions carefully, and we call this reference interviewing. It's immediate. The back and forth is great. And both the youth department and the adult department do this. We try to ask open questions and get follow-up so we can really understand what you're looking for. But sometimes there's limited time. Sometimes there's lots of people to help out here, or you are potentially in a hurry. You can also reach out over the phone as well. We do the same thing. We lose the body language aspect on the phone, but we're still listening and happy to help you out. And of course, sometimes people ask to kind of just have us pull things, and then when you come to the library, you can kind of filter through them. And Kevin can talk a little more about it from the youth perspective.
Yeah, so similar to what Brian said, we can do a lot of different things for a reference interview. It doesn't have to be a really long conversation. It could just be that you're looking for different books by the same author, or are confused about where something might be located. It could be something, like I mentioned earlier, I'm really interested in crafting nonfiction books. And we can show you that section and have you browse, or it can be something a little bit more in depth. So it's really just based on your comfort level. And again, I think that follow-up is really important. Sometimes you'll ask for something and we'll pull something and you just say, no, that's absolutely not what I want. Or, and we can kind of follow up based on that and get to the heart of what you're really looking for. And that can kind of lead to some good information as far as what you're interested in and maybe about your reading history or things that you've liked in the past. And also, like Brian said, we can do general things or really specific. So we can do specific book recommendations, or we definitely get phone calls or in-person questions of something like, I'm really interested in finding out as much as I can about sharks. Can you pull or show me as many shark books as you possibly can? And we're happy to do that and either put them on hold for you or just pull them out and have you take some time to look at them and then choose the best ones.
And of course, just speaking more to that, here is contact information for us. So phone number 847-677-5277 is the library main line where our front desk will help route you. If you already know that you want to talk to the youth department, their number is 224-233-1843. And the adult services department is 224-233-1841. And we're also available by email as well, youthservices@lincolnwoodlibrary.org and infoservices@lincolnwoodlibrary.org are our email addresses. All right, so here is the Lincolnwood Library collection strategy policy. You can see how we've updated it over the years. It's been updated within the last 6 or 7 months. And this is a fairly long document, 10 pages. You can see even more specifically, but you can see, again, kind of what we're referring to in terms of diversity, beyond what Kevin said, format, types of publishers, all sorts of different things. We care about accuracy of content. We do have to manage the space in the building. So like Kevin said, if something is not being checked out as often, its popularity has waned and we might have to get rid of it. If things have gotten damaged, of course, we make sure that the collection is fresh. And there are just a whole bunch of factors. We are basically constantly maintaining the collection to make sure that it is the best for you. And you can see everything about that in this document.
Okay, so then we can talk about NoveList, which you can access with your Lincolnwood Library card. So it is a database that we subscribe to and that you have access to if you have a Lincolnwood Library card. And NoveList is great by how it organizes different fiction and nonfiction books, by how they appeal to readers. So it goes beyond just, here are really popular fiction books, or here are really popular nonfiction books. They also do much more specific characterizations, such as here are romances that have great, strong female leads, or here are books that are really fast-paced or character-driven, and things like that. It also is great for author and title read-alikes. So if you like something, maybe it's something that you weren't usually familiar with, or just getting into a genre, if you're just getting into graphic novels and you said, oh, I really liked the Amulet series, I would love another kind of high-paced graphic novel for my age group, NoveList is going to be a really good resource to find that pretty easily and in a user-friendly way without having to go to the library. All right, so we are going to do a quick demo of NoveList. So I'm here on the Lincolnwood Library webpage and just under research and learning. And then I went to quick links, and you can kind of see in alphabetical order. We have a lot of our databases written here. So I just went down all the way to NoveList and clicked on it, and that should open it up. Right, and I was going to say, since I'm at the library, it just kind of automatically pulled it up without any issues. So a few things to note are something like I'm in the mood for books that are. So it kind of, you can see right off the bat kind of how it breaks books down into kind of new and interesting categories. And so you can kind of do something a little bit more traditional like adult. I'll click on teen. And then you can kind of see some examples that they do here. So if you are looking for something that is action-packed, you can see the options there. You also can see on the left-hand side that there's also more traditional things such as historical fiction or just best of the 2020. And then if you click on a book, there we go. Okay, so it gives also great descriptions, which is something that I really liked. And it also kind of goes through kind of different genres as well as pace and tone and writing style. So it really kind of breaks down a lot of the different categories in a really easy to understand way. So this is something that I really use both professionally, but also personally. It's just really helpful to have a general understanding not only of the description, but also things like the pace and tone. If I'm interested in something specific, like I really don't want something slow paced, I'm really looking for fast pace, this can kind of cut through that really quickly, and I don't have to have the book in hand. I don't have to read a preview. I can just kind of get a sense right off the bat. And then other helpful things, because this is kind of linked to the Lincolnwood Library, and since you need a library card, you can automatically kind of check the library's catalog. If this was something I was interested in checking out, I can just go right to the library here. I can also check more reviews on Goodreads. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, you can see some more professional reviews. So if you wanted to get a little bit even more in-depth, as well as kind of get kind of the reviewer's overall sense of the book, you can scroll down and kind of do a little bit of a deeper dive all in one place. So it kind of gives you that option of doing something really quick and finding out a lot of information, but it's also kind of a central source for a lot of different information and reviews. And then the other thing that I wanted to touch base on with NoveList is their more advanced searches. So I'm going to click on that. And so this is a great way to kind of get something specific for you. So you can search, oops, go back there. And you can do things by title and all of that, kind of similar to what we've already talked about. And then there's also things up in this top left-hand corner, like suggest read-alikes, or something like Reader's Advisory, which is going to be great if you are looking for something similar to an author or a book that you've already really liked. And you can also kind of customize things specific to you and create your own search terms by saying, I want to search for things that are fast-paced or have a really plot-driven book or a character-driven book. And those are really helpful to kind of replicate something that you might find in a reference interview and replicate it online. So the next thing is Goodreads, which is owned by Amazon. So it's kind of like a social network, and it's really great for helping you track your own reading. You can set reading goals and kind of track your progress. You can also see what you're reading and see what your friends are reading. I particularly really like to see kind of what my family members are reading, since I don't necessarily see my family all the time or don't always have time to check in with them. It's kind of like any other social network that you can kind of check in on friends and family, and specifically with book recommendations, see what they're interested in and see what they like and don't like. It's also great. There's all these kind of user-made curated lists. So that's really helpful if you want to find kind of general read-alikes or just people's favorite books of the year. If you're kind of quote unquote friends with someone, a lot of times people can create their own lists, such as, favorite books, or these are books that I read that are related to my job, or, my favorite picture books, or whatever it is. You can kind of easily see that. So it has a lot of those benefits that you get with any other social network, but it's specific for books. So there are quite a lot of benefits in that way. I know I've definitely gotten book recommendations just by scrolling and seeing what some of my friends are reading, just because you're probably going to have similar tastes, or at least be interested in what your friends and family are reading. And then generally, if you're not looking at specifically what your friends or family are thinking about the book or writing reviews, and you're not writing your own reviews, you can also kind of see really big picture about kind of reviews people have left about the book. Obviously, just similar to something like Amazon, you take those with a grain of salt. Obviously, there's very few people that are professionals that write reviews on Goodreads, although I think there are professionals, but all of those are compiled onto the site. So you have to kind of understand that it's not necessarily an authority when you're thinking of or looking at those kind of reviews. We are going to talk a little bit about early literacy and kind of how to approach early literacy and what the library approaches, and also some of the library's resources that we have specifically for early literacy, because it's a little bit different than any other time of reading and any other time of viewing content. And it's also one of the most important because it really kind of lays the foundation for the rest of the person's life. So definitely at the library, we have a lot of different things that we do with early literacy. It's kind of a whole separate branch, although all of the staff members are certainly involved with early literacy to some extent. So we have kind of our year-long program or consistent program called 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, which encourages kids from birth to kind of age right before they enter kindergarten. So really kind of that first 5-ish years of life to read and kind of consume 1,000 books. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. We also do story times and early literacy programs. And then at those story times and throughout online and in the library, we do lots of handouts and information to kind of educate people about what the library is doing and just resources for yourself to look at. We have an entire section, our board book section, and then early literacy backpacks, which are kind of thematic and kind of literacy beyond just books, that you can have crafts and activities that you can take home. And then we have kind of virtual story times and our YouTube page where we have a lot of different early literacy activities for children and parents. So I think it makes sense to just kind of go over what we mean when we talk about early literacy and just do a very big picture overview. So when we talk about early literacy, we talk about language development as a whole. We really kind of think about ensuring that the child is progressing appropriately, and really we kind of look at developing an understanding of reading and language and just kind of looking at literacy as a whole, not just like reading ability or understanding books. And then so kind of going along with that, it's not just about books, but also doing language activities such as rhymes and music and movement is a great way to develop the literacy. And it's also a great bonding activity and a way for a caregiver to connect with a child and just develop relationships. And then, like I mentioned earlier, it's really early literacy is just kind of a foundation that hopefully the child can then build upon for the rest of their life and instill that lifetime of learning and exploration, which we hope to foster at the library. And so then research generally says that early literacy is super important to a child's future success. The general advice is to read as much as humanly possible from the time that a child is born. And so there really is no specific age that you need to start thinking about early literacy. It's always important. And just the amount of words is super important for newborns and infants to hear. And there have been a lot of different studies that have shown kind of that early foundation of early literacy has a pretty big impact on that child's life, even when they're an adult. So infants need to hear adults talk, and they need to be engaged with early literacy as early as possible. Although if you're not been doing early literacy things, it's not a bad time to start. So really as early as you can and as often as you can. And so then to talk a little bit more about 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten, which is a pretty popular program that a lot of libraries do. And it really kind of turns reading to newborns into a bit of a game. It's also kind of like Goodreads. It helps you track your progress and encourages you to read 1,000 books before kindergarten and more if you can. And again, this kind of really, the whole point of 1,000 Books Before Kindergarten is not to gain any particular kind of understanding or to, be the smartest person ever, but really just to kind of set up reading as a habit and to set it up as a family activity and a bonding activity. And it's never really too late to start, even if you don't begin right at when the child is born. There have definitely been families that have started this 1 to 2 years before. And even if you don't make it, again, the point is not to finish it. The point is just to kind of establish that literacy as a habit. And so when we talk about 1,000 books, partial books count, totally understandable. If a young child gets distracted, that's totally okay. I know most babies like certain books. I've read the Going to Bed book in the middle of the day, probably 200-300 times in 2 years. Same thing there's a book by Sandra Boynton called Eek Halloween. I've definitely read that book year round. It doesn't matter. And I used to read it probably 2 or 3 times a day for a couple months. So all of that counts because you're always repeating words, you're, getting the benefits of literacy, even if you read the same book. And same thing with audiobooks or, skipping words or skipping pages. It all counts towards the same goal.
Yeah, I'm doing 1,000 books before kindergarten with my daughter, and we read the same books every night at bedtime. All of that counts, just like Kevin said. Anything to be getting more words heard by our youngest ones.
Mm-hmm. And so here's kind of our logo for the library. And you can sign up either at the library, you can go to the youth desk and someone can help you sign up, but it's actually run, which is really convenient for everyone. It's run through the same program that we use for summer reading. So it's run through Beanstack, and you can find that on our website, lincolnwoodlibrary.beanstack.com, and you can sign up your child there. And so it's pretty easy to log, although we do have paper options, and we also have just prizes and books along the way to help encourage you, as well as lots of recommendations for you, just giving you ideas. And again, we'll talk about Storytime. Storytime is a great way to check in about this program or about early literacy in general and get more advice in addition to just talking with whatever librarian is at the reference desk. So now to talk a little bit about Storytimes. And these are obviously a huge part of most libraries, and certainly our library here. And this is really kind of the foundation of the early literacy work that we do in the library on a consistent basis. And Storytimes, if you've ever been to them, you know that it's more than just reading books. It really focuses on literacy as a whole. It's reading, but also interacting that reading with songs, with rhythm, with movement, and even just free play, because all of these ideas are connected. It's why we have something like musical story time with Michael's Music Machine, which is really popular. And people love that, not only because it's fun, but it definitely interacts, traditional reading with movement and music, which is super important. And the other element that's really important with Storytimes is that it's a place to kind of convene together and get more information. We always say that Storytimes are about kind of the whole family. So it's not just about the child, but it's about the caregivers as well. So it's a place for them to kind of learn about early literacy, as well as learn things that they can do at home. Because we always talk about in our Storytimes that the parents modeling the behavior is going to be way more important and way more impactful than a librarian doing it at kind of the front of the room that you're doing it in. So it's really kind of, a Storytime is a great way to kind of learn more about early literacy and to kind of find some easy things that you can do at home. And then obviously right now we're still doing virtual Storytimes, although we are doing them through Zoom. So we actually have found that doing them through Zoom can lead to some more direct interaction. So that's been super fun. And then we will resume in-person Storytimes when it's safe to do so for everyone. But that's just kind of a general overview of Storytime. So it's more than just reading books. You can see here, it's very interactive. And usually at all of our in-person Storytimes, we end with a half an hour or even more than half an hour of just free play where kids can read or just kind of interact with other kids, because that's also a super important part of development and literacy. So additionally, we have a lot of different handouts, and we always are kind of bringing in new handouts and information to different parents and children about early literacy. And we have them on things such as parenting and technology, which is obviously very important and why we're providing this series, as well as easy to read handouts on book recommendations for young children, and then more kind of things for adults such as kindergarten readiness and places to go to kind of understand what that's about, since that's a big question that can be very confusing. And then also just lists of resources to find things like rhymes and songs and things like that. And basically it is us trying to boil down a bunch of sometimes complicated information into something more palatable for a caregiver. Because while early literacy as a theory can be overwhelming, you certainly don't need to be a psychologist to help kids learn. And these handouts can kind of take some of the more complicated ideas and help provide you resources. So this is just kind of an example of something that can be pretty complicated. Kindergarten readiness, we've gotten a lot of questions. A few years ago, we offered a specific program on kindergarten readiness just because it can be pretty overwhelming to know what skills kids need or what skills to work on or what you can do. And this is just kind of a handout that we have that breaks everything down and also just provides you resources and websites and organizations that do a little bit more in depth on something like kindergarten readiness or literacy when you're making a transition to school. And so our actual selection and kind of all of the books and content that we have for early literacy, a lot of them are going to be in our board book section. And we get a lot of questions about kind of what we recommend for really young children, so birth to kind of age 3 or 4. And really most of those books are going to be in the board book selection. And the reason being is it's a perfect introduction to reading. And a lot of the benefits of board books are how they're physically constructed. So they're very thick and really, really durable. If you've ever seen a very small child with a book, you can know that they can be pretty rough on them. And that's what they're really meant for. They're meant for that exploration. And also just the way that they're typically written is usually a very simple image and then really simple language. And so it's not so overwhelming because even picture books, some of the more advanced ones, the artwork can be really elaborate and there can be pretty overwhelming to a small baby. And they're not going to get as much out of it as something like this. So you can see here, Moo Ba La La La, which is written by Sandra Boynton, which is one of probably the most popular board books that we have. And you can kind of see the simplicity. And you can also see that it's kind of very small, so it's also easy to hold, which is also helpful for parents, because a lot of times you're reading and the child's in your lap. So all of those things are considered when making board books. So it's definitely a great place to start. And this is part of our board book selection. We actually just expanded this area, which is really exciting because we can offer more options. And you can kind of see through this picture, but also a lot more in person, just kind of the type of books that you're going to see. They're typically really thick cardboard and on a lot of different topics. There's really a wide range of topics, especially now, which is great. And then we have our early literacy backpacks, which is a great way to check out kind of an entire literal backpack. And you'll see what they look like in a second, of kind of themed materials for your children. And these are great because they explore more than just one element of early literacy. So it'll include books as well as activities and toys and instructions for games on different themes. So we have backpacks on potty training, which is super popular, music, and more. So we have a lot of different options. And this is also an easy way to explore multiple different books and then connect them to different activities and toys and things like that. And then we also have handouts that can go along with these backpacks if you want to get more information and learn about how to use them appropriately and to get the most benefit out of them. And then we have, this is just kind of an example of our early literacy backpacks. So you can see on the right-hand image, there's several different books related to music, as well as a couple of different toys that would really be great to kind of pair along with the books. And there's also kind of handouts and things like that that you can use to help kind of guide you as to what's in the backpack, as well as kind of how it can be used. And then especially with our YouTube channel, and really a lot of different YouTube channels, is a great resource for a lot of different information. Again, we talked about audiobooks and books read out loud can be really beneficial to early literacy, as well as just different rhymes and so much more. So, and YouTube is really free by default. So while there may be advertisements, it's a great way to get a lot of different content. So we have a lot of baby rhymes, we have old story times, book recommendations, and book talks from our staff. And then we even have like full recordings of some of our youth events. So, and even if you don't view our content, other libraries have a lot of similar things. So there's really kind of an endless supply of content available. And it also is a great way to kind of get new recommendations or just kind of do some variations on similar things. My daughter loves one particular recording of The Hungry, Hungry Caterpillar, which we've read hundreds of times, but it's great to kind of see a different visualization of the book and to hear someone else read it, which is super valuable.
All right, so here is the Lincolnwood Library YouTube channel, available at youtube.com/c/Lincolnwood Library. We have all of our videos here that we have put online. You can just browse the main collection or go by playlists. We have the technology for child caregivers, which when this will be posted, we'll have 2 videos. We've got all sorts of different events on here. We've got clubs and book talks and story times, 115 early learning videos, which is amazing. All sorts of book talks, and we highlight our new books. But I just want to show you this early learning playlist. We can see all the videos in specific playlists. It's really great that they are very short, and you see kind of the theme, the topic of the particular early learning video, and we have a ton of them. You can just watch one, or you can even shuffle and just pick a random one, and you can learn with your child on YouTube. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. For Kevin and myself, Brian, I want to thank you so much. Again, here is all of our contact information. We are happy to help you more in terms of selecting media for those that you are caregivers for or that are in your family. You can reach out at our main phone number, again, 847-677-5277. You can email our youth services department or our adult department. You can go to our YouTube channel. Our website has a ton of great resources, and our specific databases like NoveList are available on our quick links page.
So yeah, and then obviously everyone in the youth department that is at the reference desk or really at any time through email loves to answer these types of questions, even if they're super vague. We get questions all the time that are as general as, can you help me find something to read or something to watch? And those are great questions because we can find out a lot of information and really help you, guide you through a lot of different resources. And we typically have a resource that benefits everyone. So don't feel afraid to reach out, because we certainly love to help.
All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. We look forward to helping you out with more videos in this series. And again, just reach out if you have more questions. Thanks so much.